Hi, this is KatieLyn with Taking Flight. I am actually out in California right now for a new adventure, but earlier this week I have been working on a project from a trip from earlier in the year, my trip to Costa Rica. For those of you who don't know, my mom bought a property out in Montezuma, Costa Rica, and so she has been learning Spanish. Now, before she went out there, she had very little knowledge of Spanish, but she has been learning. Now, learning a new language is hard enough, but my mom added the fact that she's learning a new dialect in Costa Rica. So she's learning a lot through trial and error. Shed some light on her adventure, her journey learning Spanish. I interviewed my mom last week, or I guess it was this week, a couple days ago. And so this interview is gonna look a little different from most, simply because she is actually out in Costa Rica right now. And so when we first tried to do this interview, she was at a local soda and she managed to get some strong enough Wi-Fi that we could video chat. It was great. And then I lost the audio to those videos. So I had to have her resend her video answers to each of the questions. So while I will not actually be interacting with her directly, she gave me some really great stuff to work with. So I can't wait to share. So anywho, let's get right into it. Alrighty, so first things first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself in Costa Rica?
Hi, I'm KatieLyn. I am talking to you from Montezuma, Costa Rica. I am here until December 23rd. I am from Colorado and I come down here for a few months each winter to escape the cold, have a bit of an adventure in paradise, experience new things, learn a new language, and have some warm weather.
I completely understand that search for the warm weather. When I initially interviewed my mom, it was actually snowing pretty hard outside, and as she was showing me this like beautiful warm like jungle like atmosphere in Costa Rica at the time, it was pretty funny as I was bundled up with my dogs on the couch, trying not to think about how cold it was. So my next question for my mom though was, before coming out to Costa Rica, how much Spanish did you know?
Before I came to Costa Rica, I knew not a word of Spanish. Well, perhaps that's a lie. I probably know unos, dos, tres, and vámonos from watching Dora Explorer. But that's probably about it. So, that was my experience. I did know some French, but no Spanish whatsoever.
So when I first went to Costa Rica, I didn't really know much Spanish either. I knew this much. I could barely get by. From my last trip, I definitely improved a lot. I'm proud to say I kind of had a conversation with my taxi driver once. It was a few words, but I got by. And so I understand not knowing a lot when you first go to a country. And how did that affect you when you were first there? Did it seem hard, difficult?
Surprisingly, not knowing any Spanish hasn't really been that much impediment to existing down here in Costa Rica. Many of the ticos do know how to speak English, and when you try to converse with them in your broken Spanish, we'll switch over to English, as their English is much better than my Spanish. They're very considerate and helpful, and for the most part, between sign language, speaking broken Spanish, and gesturing a lot, we get the point across.
I definitely think the people in Costa Rica can communicate with us in English better than we could communicate in Spanish. My only instance where I had a bit of trouble communicating with someone was when my friend and I, Leanne, we kind of ran low on money before we got onto the bus, and so we only had enough money for one bus fare, and we're trying to explain this to the bus driver, and he just was like, this is how much it costs, give it or leave. The one very nice local was able to pitch in and help us out, but it was kind of a sticky situation, and we were like, we don't want to travel on our own and leave one of us behind. And yeah, so it definitely, things like that made me want to get better at Spanish and get better at the local language. So what tools did you use to get better?
I have been using Duolingo to learn Spanish. I found that fairly helpful. The only problem with that is, as I mentioned before, is that it doesn't necessarily prepare you for the words that you are going to use. It has set exercises that it does, and sometimes it just doesn't cover the circumstances you encounter. I've also used Speechling, I believe it's called. I find that helpful because you tape yourself speaking, and it's amazing sometimes what you think you sound like, that's not what's coming out at all. It sounds entirely different. Sometimes the people here, the Ticos, will listen, and even though you're trying to speak their language, you can tell that what you're saying is just not coming out right, even if you're using the right words. So getting emphasis on your pronunciation is very important. I did work with a tutor for a couple weeks, and it's basically all we covered during that time was pronunciation, and I did find it really helped. There was a lot of sounds that I wasn't pronouncing correctly, short words that were coming out wrong, and so it's important to get those correct. And then, so a combination of methods is probably the best way of learning the language. Definitely trying to speak it with any Spanish-speaking person, and also I often will say, hey, don't speak English, I will try and get this said in Spanish, and they're very understanding in knowing that that's what you're trying to do, and a lot of them are trying to speak English too, so we'll both help each other.
Also use Duolingo to get better at the languages I'm trying to learn, and it has been great. It's helped me a lot, but it definitely does have its limitations. So getting the help from a local tutor sounds amazing. How has that helped? Have you seen a difference in your Spanish skills from your first trip to this trip you're currently on?
This is about, I believe it's my 5th or 6th trip to Costa Rica, and happily I can report that yes, my Spanish has actually improved. I'm beginning to understand if I'm listening to conversation. I'll sometimes get the gist of a simple conversation. When people are yammering away together on a bus or something, very unlikely to understand that, but just simple directions I can understand. I can usually ask for things. So yes, it has improved. I'm beginning to feel I can get along a little better.
It's really great to hear that the practice and everything has been successful and you've gotten better at learning Spanish. I know I was looking forward to putting my French skills to use this year when I traveled to Europe. That got canceled. I'm not salty. It's fine. But has there been any challenges with learning these new languages? Have there been some words that you've learned, you've mastered, and then you never hear words that they use instead?
Costa Rica, for the most part, not really too much. There's a few words. There's always dialects and expressions that are used in an area. I've been trying to use the Latin American versions of everything I've been listening to rather than, for example, the Spanish that one would use in Spain. So there's a few words, though, that I've noticed haven't been covered in my courses, which you hear all the time. And, the first thing I had to say is, what are these words mean? Here you hear mucho gusto, which is you're welcome with thanks. You'll hear pura vida very often, and that's unique to Costa Rica. It's the pure life, the good life. It is used as a greeting, it's used as a farewell, and it's used just in passing. Have a great day, pura vida.
Pura vida is definitely one of my favorite Costa Rican words. I think it is absolutely amazing, and you can definitely feel pura vida when you're in Costa Rica. It's unreal. As someone who visits Costa Rica for the first time, I can understand though that Pura Vida can be a term you just don't recognize. You don't understand what it means. You can be like, what is this? Why is everyone telling me Pura Vida? Were there any other challenges to learning Spanish when you were there? Any funny consequences of not being able to quite get your point across?
One of the harder parts about not knowing how to speak Spanish, the native language of Costa Rica, is that while we're trying to build a house, we have many trips to the local ferreteria, which is the hardware store. And when we go there, there's one fellow who knows how to speak English, but the rest are all ticos and native Spanish-speaking people with very limited English. And sometimes conversing with them is hard, as the courses on how to learn Spanish phrases don't really cover much in building terms. We need to know words such as toilet flange, rebar, names of tools, PVC pipes, joints, all that just don't cover in the courses. So that's been a little bit of a learning experience, but we find that with Google Translate, as long as you type correctly and if you download pictures, you can usually end up buying what you want. Very rarely have we not come home with what we anticipated. There was one mistake at some point. We wanted a toilet seat as we were building an outhouse, and when the delivery truck showed up, there was a full-size toilet there. So, that's one communication problem. We got a toilet instead of toilet seat.
I'm not sure how that's the first time I've heard that story. It's kind of hilarious. And so I can kind of imagine the ticos who were delivering that toilet, and you make that mistake. They're like, oh my gosh, what a gringo mistake. And for everyone who doesn't know, a gringo is a person who comes into Costa Rica. They are the tourists or the expats, they're gringos. And then your ticos are the locals, they're the natives. So there's kind of that different dynamic in Costa Rica. So when you first learned those words though, gringo and tico, how did they make you feel?
When I first heard the words gringo and tico used, I thought they might have a bit of a derogatory connotation, but in reality they don't. It's used quite commonly and nobody feels taken aback being called a gringo. The gringos are the expats in the country, and then the ticos are the natives. And it's quite common talk, and it's not derogatory in any manner.
I definitely had similar initial feelings towards those words of tico and gringo, but it's good to hear there's really nothing negative about them. It's just the local language. So, kind of in the same theme, I have a list of Costa Rican words that I found on good old Google, and I want to see how many of these you've encountered, how much you actually know. So let's see.
Macho, macha. Can't say I've really run across that word. Looks like there's a he and her version of it. So, guess macho, mucho. Don't really know. Don't know this one. Típico. Típico. That would be used for something like a típico for a desayuno. Típico would be a typical breakfast. So native breakfast. Native food, for example, would be a típico. Fruta típico. A soda. A soda is a restaurant, your corner restaurant serving native foods and the comida típico, which would be native food. They're usually quite affordable and a good experience. Pulperia. A pulperia is actually a grocery store. Your corner store, your convenience store would be called a pulperia.
Well, I'd give you a pretty solid 8 out of 10. That was a pretty good answers. That is everything that I have to ask. Thank you so much for doing this for me. It means so much. I'm sure you have some way for me to pay you back later. I'll do the dishes or something. Do you have any other final farewells, thoughts about Costa Rica in Spanish?
So in closing, I'd like to say yes, it's very helpful to know learn a new language in a foreign country. It's challenging, but it makes your experience that much better. You can participate in small talk, you can join in community events, and it'll just make you feel much more part of what's going on. So that's about all I have to say. Bye from Montezuma, Costa Rica.
Alrighty, that's everything that I've got to you. Thank you so much for watching. It means a lot. I put quite a bit of work into this. I can't wait to write, video, tell you all about my current adventure. This is KatieLyn taking flight.